welcome to the Archaeological Society of Delaware's Digging Delaware series. Here, I'll be speaking with local archaeologists about their experiences and how they got into archaeology. Today, I'm speaking with local archaeologist Paul Nasca. So welcome, Paul. Why don't you give us a little background on who you are?
Hi, Curtis. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you today. My name's Paul Nasca. I'm the curator of archaeology for the state of Delaware with the Delaware Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs. So before starting with HCA, I was also a curator at Alexandria Archaeologists, so over in Virginia, and I was there for about 5 years. I was an archaeologist and collections care manager there for the city. Before making the transition into sort of curatorial work, I was a field archaeologist and spent almost 10 years at a small not-for-profit in Fredericksburg, Virginia called the George Washington Foundation at Ferry Farm, which is the boyhood home of George Washington, searching for Washington's home. And I got my start there because of my connections as a graduate student at the College of William & Mary, where I met David Maraca when I was working for Colonial Williamsburg. So that's sort of my pathway to archaeology. Before coming south to William & Mary, I was graduated from the University of Buffalo with a bachelor's in anthropology. Got my start up there at Old Fort Niagara doing archaeology. So that's my archaeological career in a nutshell.
So what made you want to get into archaeology?
You know, that's a good question, and I've sort of thought about it a lot because you sent me the questions ahead of time. But, you know, I graduated from high school. I was sort of an average student in high school, CB student, and my whole family's work is construction. So I was just destined to head into the field of construction after high school. But my dad encouraged me, why don't you take a couple of college courses along the way? So while I was doing my apprenticeship, I started taking courses at the local community college. And growing up in the small town I did in Lewiston, New York, a historical little town, I always sort of have this sense of history and sort of connection to history of the place. But once I got into college, I took an anthropology course, an intro to physical anthropology. And then I met another professor who was an archaeologist and got me involved with archaeology at Old Fort Niagara. And it was his words that really put me on the path to archaeology. And he said, chase your dream, follow your dream, and go for it. And so here I am. 30 plus years later, I'm still chasing that dream.
Well, in a minute or less, what's some of your current research interests?
Current research, as curator of archaeology for the state of Delaware, we recently just moved the whole state's not only archaeological collections, but historic collections as well to a brand new, literally brand new, built from the ground, new curatorial facility. So I've been dedicating basically the past 2 years of work to moving the state's collections to this really state-of-the-art facility. While doing that, I have a little bit of a side research. I'm a big stoneware, historic stoneware fan, and I'm looking for Delaware's first stoneware potter. His guy's name is Branch Green in the state's archaeological collections here. And I see little bits and pieces of Branch Green throughout the collection. So it's a research interest that I will continue to chase for the years to come.
Yeah, and you, in the last couple of years, published an article with the ASD Bulletin on Delaware's first stoneware potter, correct?
That's right. It's a very brief little snippet of some of Branch Green's career and hoping to build on that. Unfortunately, COVID-19 postponed my recent ASD talk, so I'm looking forward to pulling some of this research together and presenting it to you folks.
Yeah, that'll be great. So, Paul, what's one of your best or worst field stories?
Best and worst, huh? That's I'm going to go back to one of my worst field experiences was in grad school. It had a good ending though, and me and a fellow graduate student were left to clean up an archaeological site and do final photos after our professor left on a small Dutch island in the Caribbean called not Guana Island, it was at St. Eustatius. Norm Barca had left me and another archaeologist, whose name I won't say because he's still an archaeologist today, to clean up the site and take final photos. Well, being young archaeological students that we were, we left things to the very bitter end. So we were going to do final photographs the day we actually left. Our airplane was leaving the island that afternoon. And so we got up early and got to the site, and on the horizon were rain clouds. So we frantically photographed the site because we did not want to let our professor down, and got completely drenched right at the end, gathered up all of our clothes, and literally arrived at the airport with our stuff, and just made our flights off the island. So it was a real nail biter. So I guess the long and the short of that, or is the kernel to take away for future archaeological students, is don't leave photographs to the last day of the day. Give yourself at least a 1-day buffer in there. So that was my worst, but one of my funnest archaeological experiences. So
yeah, and I feel like we always find the coolest thing on the last day of a project, so you're always frantic. So
the last day is always a nail biter, no matter what it is, self-induced or not. So that was, I guess that was a worst case scenario. One of my best field experiences, I guess, was a 9-year experience with Ferry Farm, where through excavation, the George Washington landscape really came alive through the process of archaeology. And if you visit Ferry Farm today, the efforts of that archaeological effort are borne out through reconstruction. So it's a really, it was a super experience to be a part of.
Well, Paul, what's one of the coolest things you've ever learned from an archaeological project?
You know, we as archaeologists always have, we learn so much through archaeology, and we often have more questions at the end than when we started on a project. But one thing that's really stuck with me, and is an area of research that I would like to continue, even though I'm no longer associated with the project, is again Ferry Farm. Being right on the banks of the Rappahannock River, Ferry Farm was not only George Washington's boyhood home, but was the front line during the Civil War between two great armies. And we all know the impact that those armies brought to Fredericksburg. And so the first occupation was in the spring of 1862, and there was sort of this conciliatory policy of, you know, let's just be friends again and hug and make up, and, you know, we'll call all this Civil War business over with. And but then when the military returns in the late fall, winter of 1862, the policies have changed a lot to a much harder war, and that's when the Great Battle of Fredericksburg happens. And the Ferry Farm landscape, through archaeology, was able to reveal sort of this this changing policies of the military through the archaeology. And they literally ripped down the house that was there, and the soldiers write about how they thought it was the Washington house they tore down. It actually wasn't the Washington house, but through archaeology of the house that was there, we could see how evidence of Civil War soldiers literally using that landscape and also impacting that landscape through their presence. So it was a really, it was a really interesting thing to see, not only through the archaeology, but also through the documentary research. And also there's being Fredericksburg, there's a fantastic photographic record as well that captures the Ferry Farm landscape.
Well, Paul, our last question for you today is, how are you coping with COVID-19 right now?
Coping with COVID. It sounds like a rap song. I wish I could rap better, so, but I'm not good at it. What am I doing? I have a toddler at home. So no, the lack of daycare. Much of my COVID time is spent looking after my little boy. So with, of course, my wife, who's also an archaeologist, who you should also interview at some point. My little boy has been keeping me busy during COVID. But besides that, I planted 900 square feet of sod in our side yard. What a ridiculous thing to do. If you're gonna lay sod, have somebody else do it. That's a kernel of wisdom I bestow upon the ASD community. And trying to keep it alive in a heat wave and 90-degree temperature days is Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill kind of a thing. That's how I feel. So.
Well, Paul, thank you for joining us today and letting me interview you.
Thank you, Curtis. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and good luck to all you and all of ASD.
All right. Well, for those of you tuning in, thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.